At NC Child, we're a 501(c) nonprofit. We're an advocacy organization. And our goal is to get good public policy across the finish line for kids in North Carolina. That's our main objective. We do that in a few different ways. We do that through our policy, and we've got some members of our policy team here. Hopefully you get to meet them in a little bit. We do that through our research, and you'll see today with Neil in his presentation. And then we do that through community engagement with Kelvin and Amy and Coop and the work that we're doing. And so we do that through a whole different facet of ways of how we engage community, have good conversations, hard conversations, conversations that matter and mean something. And so I really look forward to having that conversation today. I'm going to turn it over to our friend Christy King, who's the president and CEO of the Richmond County Chamber. And I'm so thankful that she's here. And she's just going to give a few words.
Thank you, Josh. I echo what he says. I appreciate all of you being here today. The information that we hear today is going to be crucial to Richmond County and the role that each of you hear today and as you take back to your businesses as we move forward. The collaboration and participation from key leaders, the businesses, and the overall community here in Richmond County is going to be relevant and important as we continue to improve the outcome of all the kids here in Richmond County. It is our responsibility, everybody's responsibility in this community, to ensure that our children thrive and have the resources to do so in their lives. I appreciate the investment that every one of you in this room has already put forth by being here today and by joining us today as we listen to this presentation and put it forth in our lives as we move forward. So thank you again.
Now I'm going to introduce Michael Cooper and Neil Harrington for the data card presentation. Please help me give them a round of applause.
Good afternoon. We can do better. Let's hear it today. I'm pretty excited to be here. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Wonderful. So I'm excited to meet some new friends here in the community, including Josh's mom in the back. I had not met Josh's mom before. I met your father before, but my mom was also a school teacher up in Wilkes County, where I grew up. And so, talking to a lot of our staff about how they got involved in this work, how they came to NC Child, you hear a lot of stories about parents, grandparents, family members who had books in the home, who encouraged us to get an education and to learn about this stuff. And so having folks like that in the household, in the community, really makes a difference. I also see Adrian in the back, one of the members of our Parent Advisory Council, who lives here in the area. Thank you for joining us, Adrian. So I'm Michael Cooper, Senior Director of Advocacy for NC Child, and we have the honor of serving as the voice for North Carolina's children. And part of that, in that spirit, our hearts are with the children and families right now in Western North Carolina. A lot of y'all have seen what's happening in the news right now. Kelvin and I were just in Asheville last Wednesday for a child care summit. And we were meeting with folks, and they knew a storm was coming. They didn't know how bad it was going to be. And now it's going to take years for them to rebuild. But we're all doing the best we can, I think, right now to be helpful, to check in on family members and friends out there, folks that we know out there. We're sending in donations. We're figuring out what we can do to be helpful and support. And it's inspiring to see folks react like that in a moment of crisis. When you see folks in need, your immediate instinct is, what can I do to help? And it's inspiring to see that, and it's inspiring to be today in a room full of helpers. As Josh said, y'all wouldn't show up at 12 o'clock on a Tuesday unless y'all are interested in helping out and making sure that folks have the help they need, which is why this is a good place to talk about how children are doing right now in the state of North Carolina and what they need. Today, our research director, Neil Harrington, is going to provide the data. He's going to give us a snapshot on how children and families are faring in North Carolina and then here at the county level. And then Kelvin and Josh are going to walk us through a conversation about what we can do about it and how we can work together to address these issues. But if you take one thing away from today, I want that to be that, children in North Carolina do need our attention. In some ways, it's never been easier to be a child in America. In some ways, it's never been more challenging. When you think about what they're growing up with, they're growing up in a world very different from the one that the adults in this room grew up in. And there's smartphones and social media and peer pressures they can never turn off. For the parents in this room, there's a child care crisis. And that keeps them up at night worrying about, how do I be able to afford care for my child? But it also is a concern for the business leaders here and for the elected officials, making sure that the local economy can keep up with everybody else. So, and there's also these impacts, and we're going to talk about today about the impacts of the pandemic on education outcomes, on family incomes, on the foster care system. There are investments that are running out and issues that won't go away. Some of these issues are getting better, some of the issues are getting worse, and some are staying the same. And that's an issue of itself. If the majority of children in North Carolina in 3rd grade are not reading at grade level, we shouldn't accept that. If the Surgeon General is warning us about the state of youth mental health, we shouldn't ignore that. And here in North Carolina, we have a child welfare system that needs fixing. We have too many children who go hungry at night. Today's children need teachers and counselors and role models and mentors, and they need folks who are showing up and asking them if they're doing the things that they need to do and getting the help that they need. Which is why this is a great place to have this conversation. We're thrilled to be here in a room full of helpers. And I hope that we can talk about how do we react not just when it's a moment of crisis, but how do we react when we see the information and we know these things are happening every day and we need to help out. So thank y'all for being with us. I'm going to introduce our research director, Neil Harrington, who's going to run us through what the information is like here in Richmond County. Come on up, Neil. Thank y'all.
Thanks, Michael. Hi, everyone. I am Neil Harrington. I'm the research director here at NC Child. I just want to start off by echoing Josh and Michael's gratitude. Thank you for having us here today in Richmond County. It's great to be in the home of Josh McGee. I think if you ask anybody at NC Child on staff, they can probably name 2 to 3 facts about Richmond County because Josh is so passionate about his home county. So it's great to be here. I'm just going to cover first a little bit about NC Child, but Josh kind of covered that to begin with, so we can dive into my favorite part, which is the data itself. So, like Josh was saying, right, one of the ways that we do our advocacy is through research and data. That includes these county data cards that we publish every year. We have for the past 10 years or so. There's 15 data indicators on the cards that you have in front of you there, organized into 5 categories with a strong start, family economic security, nurturing homes and communities, high quality education, and health and wellness. So I personally would love to go through all 15 of these data indicators on the cards and talk about how they compare to North Carolina and the trends that we see in each of these categories, each of these data points over the past 10, 20 years. I don't think anybody else besides me in this room would love that. So instead, we are going to kind of focus on 4 broader takeaways to talk about from Richmond County's data card. And I'll cite some data that's both in the data card and then use some other data that's not in the data card to kind of dive a little deeper into some of these issues. And these 4 issues that I'll dive deeper into will really be kind of some of the top focus areas of the child policy going into. So really kind of get a snapshot of how we think about these issues and how we choose to focus on these issues impacting children and families. All right, so jumping right in, the first one is from the health and wellness category, right? It's that Richmond County has a really low childhood insurance rate, but we have seen kind of increasing child mortality rates in recent years. So starting with child uninsurance, Richmond's uninsurance rate among children is up 2% in 2022. So you can see on the slide, right, that's much lower than the 5% level that we see in North Carolina overall. And Richmond County's child insurance rate is actually the 5th lowest out of all counties in North Carolina. So I can, 5 years ago, Richmond's rate was actually slightly higher than the state's percentage. But it's dropped pretty consistently since then, as North Carolina has remained pretty consistently at 5%. This is, really, I can look at data all day and tell you kind of what the outcomes are and how it looks and how it compares to past years, but what data doesn't tell us is the work that's being done in communities to create these positive outcomes like this. So that's why we love coming to events like this and coming into communities and really get to learn about the positive work that's being done on the ground to change some of the trends that we see. see. So whenever we get to the community engagement portion, and Kelvin and Josh are leading the conversation, look forward to kind of hearing a little bit about some of that work. All right, so the next one is from the data card is the child mortality rate. So Richmond's 2022 child mortality rate was about 140 deaths per 100,000 children. And you know, as you can see on the slide, it's almost double the rate that we see at the state level. And as you can also see on the slide, right, this is actually the third highest child mortality rate in the state of North Carolina counties. We've also, you know, I think it's also important to kind of look more on health to look at another issue that we're really focused on here at NC Child, and that's the youth mental health crisis. We talked about it a little bit during the intro, but we see that more North Carolina youth are really struggling with negative emotions that are precursors to self-harm and suicide, and really reflective of poor mental health outcomes of children. In 2023, about 4 in 10 North Carolina high school students reported persistent feelings of sadness or hopelessness. So much so that it disrupted their normal day-to-day life for more than a couple of weeks. And it's really, you know, started spiking around 2015. We saw a slight dip last year, but we're still well above what we saw pre-pandemic. And more importantly, we're way above what we saw 10 to 15 years ago with the youth mental health crisis that we're seeing in North Carolina and across the country really began. We've also seen a significant increase in the number of children diagnosed with anxiety or depression in North Carolina. So between 2017 and 2022, the number of children with anxiety or depression increased by about 90%. That was nearly double the percentage increase that we saw nationally over the same period. So in 2022, about 365,000 North Carolina children have been diagnosed with anxiety or depression by a medical professional. And that's almost certainly an undercount, right? Because this is kids that have been diagnosed with anxiety or depression by a medical professional. We know that there are thousands of kids across the state that don't have access to health care in their communities. They don't have insurance coverage, they can't afford health care, so they're not being diagnosed with anxiety or depression, but they're still suffering with those same issues. Right, and all of these kind of negative emotions can lead to the saddest outcome that we can have, right, which is youth suicide. At the state level, youth suicides have risen sharply over the past decade or so. In 2022, there were about 4 youth suicides for every 100,000 children in North Carolina. And the number of youth suicides in 2022 was more than double the number in 2010. And it's not just high schoolers, right? The number of suicides among children ages 10 to 14, this middle school age children, was 5 times higher in 2022 than what it was in 2010 in North Carolina. And that's really, you know, an incredibly sad reality that we're living in. And suicide, right, is something that's affected many people. I'm sure it's affected many people in this room, but it's especially tragic when it happens so young. Anxiety and depression are also something that many, if not all of us kind of deal with to some degree. I manage anxiety and depression, and I have pretty much since my dad took his own life when I was 12 years old. Probably one of the hardest things I've ever been through in my life, and probably always will be. But I got through it relatively unscathed because of the support that I had in a loving family who had the means and the resources to really help me access the care that I need. They still provide that support system to me today when I go through something tough. But too many kids in North Carolina don't have resources and support to help them manage difficult emotions. They live in communities where they simply can't access mental health care. That's why it's really incumbent upon all of us as adults that live in communities to really make sure that kids are supported in those communities. And why advocating for youth mental health supports in schools and communities across North Carolina is really one of the top focuses of NC Child's policy agenda, and will continue to be until we see numbers like this improving. All right, that's the only second time I've talked about that personal side of it, so it's always kind of tough for me. But something far less heavy is high quality education. What I really want to focus on for Richmond County here is the third grade reading proficiency rate. So we really saw, in Richmond County, it's still well below what we saw pre-COVID-19, but that's really kind of the case across the state as well. So in Richmond County, in the 2022 to 2023 school year, about 36% of Richmond County third graders, a little over a third, scored proficient or higher on the end of grade reading exam. So as you can see on the slide, right, that's about 15 percentage points below the level of third grade reading proficiency pre-COVID-19. It's also pretty noticeably below North Carolina as well. But like Richmond County is not alone in this, right? The state also saw a similar kind of drop, and every county in North Carolina also saw this kind of decline in third grade reading scores during the pandemic. And pretty much every county has not caught back up to what it was pre-COVID-19 as well. And of course, there are a number of interventions that can improve those rates. Well, and school districts across the state are already kind of deploying those interventions to bring third grade reading scores back up to pre-COVID levels. But one thing we know that works in the long term, right, is high quality education. We know that high quality education starts early. And research shows that going to high quality child care centers can really contribute to gains in things like third grade reading scores. So some researchers at Duke about 7 years ago found that increased funding for Smart Start and NC Pre-K boosted third grade reading and eighth grade math scores for students that both attended those programs and for students in schools that didn't attend those programs. So the impact of these high quality education programs was spilt over into the larger student population, not just those that were served by them. Other research shows that high quality education can improve high school and college graduation rates. There's also a host of non-educational impacts from high quality ECE, like better health outcomes for adults, higher lifetime earnings, lower criminal justice system involvement, and more. But as all of you in this room know, right, North Carolina's child care system is really struggling. We know that there's really not enough supply out there in most communities across the state to match the demand from parents and communities. One of the other bigger problems that we see is affordability, right? The fact that child care is really expensive, and many families, even if they can access it, can't afford it. And that can sometimes result in parents dropping out of the labor force altogether instead of working, devoting such a large portion of their paycheck just to pay for child care. So Richmond County, the cost of care is a little more affordable than we see at the state level, but it's still really high, right? Center-based care for infants is about $7,300 per year in Richmond County. For toddlers, it's about $6,900 per year. And while the cost itself might be cheaper in the state overall, when we look at child care costs as a share of incomes in Richmond County, it's pretty comparable to what we see at the state level. So infant care represents about 9% of the median income of married couples in the county, and about 43% of the median income of single moms. We don't have enough data on single dads in Richmond County. The Census Bureau published reliable estimates, so they don't publish that data. But if Richmond is like many other counties in the state, child care costs as a share of single dads' median income is probably around 25 to 30%. And these are median incomes, right? So about half of people are earning below this level, half are earning above it. Parents of young children are much more likely to be earning below that median income level because they're younger, or earlier in their career, they're not earning as much money. So child care for young parents is really more expensive than what we see on this slide as well. And for context, right, those are these price points that I mentioned earlier, $7,000 for infant care, $6,900 for toddler care. Both of these are becoming more expensive or as expensive as in-state tuition at colleges in North Carolina. So Richmond County, right, is now becoming more expensive to pay for your child's education in those first critical years of their life than it is to pay for college tuition at some of the best colleges and universities in the country. And that's really the case across the entire state. It's not just something that's unique to Richmond County. But this kind of contributes to things like parents dropping out of the labor force, which has a big economic impact as well. We did an economic impact analysis recently with the U.S. Chamber of Commerce and NC Chamber of Commerce Foundation, which found that child care issues are costing North Carolina businesses about $4.3 billion per year, and costing state government about $1 billion, a little more than $1 billion in tax collections every single year. All right, so the third category here is family and economic security. And really wanted to kind of focus in on incomes in Richmond County, which have been on the rise, but also child food insecurity, which we also saw increase in 2022. So incomes in Richmond County, median income among all households in Richmond County has kind of risen the most. Between 2017 and 2020, it increased by about $8,700. But for families with children, we also saw some income growth, but it was a smaller amount of growth than what we saw for all households, right? So among households with children, median incomes rose by about $5,000 between 2017 and 2022. And this is really kind of the opposite experience of the state level, right? Where we've seen families with children at the state level have stronger income growth than the median income of all households. And this is kind of this differing experience is due partly to kind of family compositions in Richmond County. About 42% of children, of households with children in Richmond County are headed by single mothers, compared to about 25% of households at the state level. And we know that single mothers typically tend to have lower incomes than married couples across the state and across the country as well. But still, we have seen some growth in income among households with children in Richmond County, which has also contributed to a lower number of kids living in poor or low-income homes in the county. But as incomes decline, right, so have prices of goods and services that families rely on. It's really eaten into families' ability to provide the basics for their children. That's gas, vehicles, housing, groceries, and childcare have all increased considerably over the last few years. I really want to kind of zero in on the top right there, groceries, right, which the cost of food nationally has risen by about 25% since 2019. And those higher food prices have meant higher child food insecurity. As families are kind of dealing with higher price of food to put food on the table and provide for their kids, we've seen a larger number of kids in North Carolina and in Richmond County not getting enough nutritious and adequate amounts of food. So in Richmond County, right, between 2021 and 2022, the child food insecurity rate increased to about 31.1%, a little less than a third. North Carolina also saw a similar increase to about 19.6% over the same time period. But that data is also from 2022, right? The child food insecurity data, and we know that over the past couple of years, price increases have abated some. Too many parents across the state are still struggling to provide enough food for children. Some more timely data from this year shows us that about 1 in 4 households with children in North Carolina report that their kids are not eating enough due to food affordability. So choosing between providing enough food for your children, or paying the light bill, or covering rent, or paying for medical care should be a choice that any parent has to make. But in North Carolina, it's one that too many parents are making. And that should really be a problem that we all want to and should be able to come together to solve for North Carolina children and families. All right, our fourth and final takeaway here is from the nurturing homes and communities category. So from the data card, we're going to talk about kind of child abuse assessment rates, which have increased a little more than what we've seen at the state level in 2022. And other data shows us that kids are staying in the foster care system longer without permanent placement in both North Carolina and Richmond County and most other counties in the state as well. So Richmond's child abuse assessment rate, or the number of child abuse complaints that local officers investigate, declined steadily between 2019 and 2021. Then in 2022, it kind of jumped up a bit. There were about 79 child abuse assessment cases per 1,000 kids in the county in 2022, which as you can see on the slide, right, is a little bit larger than what we see at the state level. So other data shows us that many children in North Carolina, or in the foster care system, spend far too long in the system without a resolution to their case or permanent placement in a stable living situation. In Richmond, about 46% of kids are still in the child welfare system 1.5 years after after entering the system. This is lower than what we see at the state level, but it is a lot higher than we saw in 2017, right? Back in 2017, in Richmond County, only about 12.5% of children were still in the foster care system 1.5 years after entering. And that's really driven in large part by just a kind of growing number of kids in the system to begin with. Between 2017 and 2022, 2023, we've seen there's a lot more kids in the system in Richmond County than what there was 5-6 years ago. So permanency rates, right, or the share of children with permanent, stable living placement after kind of specified periods of time tell kind of a similar story. So North Carolina and its counties really aim to, for about 40.5% of kids to have a permanent placement back at home with the relative or through adoption or some other approved living situation 12 months after they entered DSS custody. Richmond does do a little better than the state overall, but it still falls a little bit short of this goal with a 12-month permanency rate of about 33% in 2023. So put it another way, right, more than 2 out of every 3 children who entered care in the year before May 2024 in Richmond County did not have a permanent placement or their situations resolved 1 year after being put into DSS custody and separated from their families. Of course, more time in the system can increase the likelihood that children develop ACEs or some other kind of traumatic event that really sticks with children for the entirety of their lives. We know from some other data that part of the reason for this is the courts across the state have been slow in clearing child welfare-related court cases. So there's a number of reasons for this, right? In a lot of counties, there's only 1 court date a month to process child welfare court cases. We know that there's not enough parent attorneys to serve families in those communities across the state, which is in part driven by low IDS or parent attorney pay, which is about $65 per hour and hasn't been updated since about 2008. We also know that sometimes hearings are postponed because the court scheduled a child welfare case in the afternoon and they got backed up and delayed, and that case got pushed, and now it's a month, it won't be heard for another month. All these things kind of contribute to cases moving very slowly through the child welfare system and kids spending more time in the system as a result. And some of these problems are in the system really fixable through policy, right? We've seen some communities implement 1 judge to 1 family policies where a judge sticks with the family until the case is resolved, and that builds continuity with the facts of that case and can process the case and get the case through the system quicker. More child welfare court dates in a month can also help courts process these cases in a more timely manner. So it can separate juvenile court cases and child welfare court case dates, as can better parent attorney pay. All these things kind of help solve some of these court issues and prevent kids from staying in the system longer than what they are. But there's really not kind of a unified statewide voice that's advocating for these changes in the General Assembly or through administrative agencies. We're working now to really kind of understand legislative and administrative policy changes that are support that would help improve the child welfare system for kids that are already in it and reduce the amount of time that they're spending in it away from their families or away from a permanent, stable living situation. And we're very much looking forward to being a voice for these issues in General Assembly with administrative agencies next legislative session and legislative sessions to come as well. I think that's all I have. That was a lot in a short amount of time. Well, actually, it's not all I have. If I had my way, you'd all remember every single thing that I said in this past 20 minutes and be able to recite it to anybody that asked you about it. But that's probably unlikely because my brain works in a weird way, and I don't think many people do. But one thing that you can do is use your voice. Talk about the issues that you see families and children in North Carolina suffering, dealing with. Talk to your legislators and make the case and join your voices with ours to help solve some of the issues that we see families and children in North Carolina who are struggling.